And we'll get started. Okay, so I started the recording, and I'm going to turn it over to Arief. So Arief, take it away.
Thank you so much, David. So as David mentioned in my introduction, and he was very generous in his praise. So let me just share my screen, and please let me know if you can. Can you enable screen sharing, David?
Let me make you, I'll make you a host. Hold on 1 second here. Make a co-host. Okay. All right.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. Let me know if that works.
And please, yes. So please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is the Azure Purview. There's a story behind this. And this has been in works for a long time now. We came up with a product called Azure Data Catalog. And I think that product was very badly envisioned, had very limited scope. And the idea was that we would have just a central database where the responsibility of cataloging all the meta information of your data sources and lineage information, actually there was no lineage at that time, was basically up to the producers of the data. And again, there were so many other problems with that product, and it really didn't catch on fire. And we saw the problems with it. And I think about 3 years ago, and about 3 years ago, when the GDPR was a hot issue, Microsoft was investing heavily into the research of making sure that we know, because we are a global company, our products are being used all over the place. We didn't want to violate any of the GDPR policies, so we did a lot of investments where we had to make sure that we are able to comply with all of the GDPR rules. And from that learnings, we really invested in the research, and from that research, we were able to harness the IPs, and that basically forms the core piece of Azure Purview. So 2.5 years back, I think they allocated one of the biggest engineering team to this product, and because it is a very complex, because the vision is so broad. They have 24 engineers that are working full time, directly reporting to Rohan Kumar, who's like the senior VP, who kind of reports to, I think he's almost a third rung in the chain, reporting to Satya. So this became a very highly visible product, and there was a lot of thrust around this. So if you look at in a nutshell where we are going with this, and I spoke about this, was at the end of the day, we want to basically have governance in place. Now, governance for us wasn't just about Microsoft products. It was more about how can a CISO or a security officer or data officer basically not only be able to see what kind of access, what kind of data sprawl they have in their environment, whether it's in Azure, whether it is in on-prem, whether it is Google Cloud or AWS, any of the data assets or third-party products, to be honest, how do we go across all these different players and still be able to gather and apply governance around it? So right now, so that was basically the vision of it. So if you want to do governance, you want to know what do you have, and that's the first piece of the Azure Purview they basically started going after. And this time they made sure that they don't put that responsibility on the producers of the data or the curators of the data. They wanted something that Microsoft could do it in using serverless to basically map all of your cataloging, all your meta information in the catalog. Then once we have enough information, we also want to make sure that you are able to classify your data. You are able to apply glossary terms to it. You're also able to apply sensitivity labels to it. Now, sensitivity labels has a different objective, because that's where your governance pieces comes to. And last but not the least, we also want to make sure that you also have insights into how your data assets are being used, which is the most popular data that's being accessed and things of that nature. And the reason why this is so complex, because if you apply a security policy, for example, or using the sensitive labels, your data could be residing, for example, in a SQL database, or it could be in a data lake, or and it could be in any shape. Now, you can access that data in multiple ways. You can either come through a REST API of the storage SDK. You can come through via Databricks. You can come through an external job through a Synapse. So there are multiple ways of accessing the data. How do you apply a security or a sensitive label to a data, and then make sure that any service that is trying to access the data, you are able to basically not only monitor it, but prevent it from accessing if you don't have the right credentials or right access, and also wallet anything that happens. Any questions anybody had? I just saw this thing. So again, so that's the utopian goal of this product. And when we will arrive to that utopian goal, it still remains to be seen. So where are we right now? As I said, if you want to do governance, then you need to know what your data sprawl is, whether it's on-prem, multi-cloud. So that's what basically this slide is that we will take the responsibility of scanning your data, capturing the lineage, applying classifications, and then basically cataloging all that information. And then obviously today, this is what's on September 28th, this is what's going to go out as a GA tool, or the main GA tool, the GA features of this product. So today, for example, we support about 20 connectors, right now most are on Azure and some are on-prem. And some are third party. We started, there are certain products like Teradata we are supporting, which is in private preview. But again, the idea is that those as ADF people who are using Azure Data Factory, as you have seen, the number of connectors we have for that, it has been increasing. I think now we have close to 80 plus connectors. So same goes with, same approach will happen with the Azure Purview thing. Now on the other side is, where are we? Again, Atlas API is very important to us. We don't want to create an ecosystem where we are basically asking you to, use our tool and you're kind of locked into it. So any assets you have, for example, it is built on Apache Atlas 2.0. So you can tomorrow take up your assets and move somewhere else. If you've created an extremely complex ecosystem, we are using Atlas API to, as some gentleman said, I want to update the lineage. Absolutely. So there is no lockdown in this product as such. So that's basically the features that will be going in GA on September 28th. So where again this slide still says it's public preview, or this public preview. And again, I'm trying to basically show you today a kind of a combination of demo plus PowerPoint slide deck. But along the way, I would also like anybody, if they have any questions, they can ask me. They don't have to wait till the end, and I'm willing to wait even after 6:30 Eastern Standard Time if anybody has any questions. So feel free to interject me. And if things are not clear on the slide, please feel free to ask me any questions. Okay. So at the core, we have something called the Purview Studio. Now, instead of showing you the slide deck, let me just basically show you the tool, what we have. And okay. So do you see a web page right now rather than a slide deck?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So basically, this is like, if you look at Microsoft products, they are coming up with a separate dedicated pages. If you are doing Databricks, you'll have a separate studio page. If you're doing ADF or you're doing Synapse, so this is similar pattern. When you launch Purview Studio from Azure portal, it will launch into a Purview Studio, and this is basically the landing page of it. Now at the end, if you see over here, right, at the top, it kind of gives you a bird's eye view. I have about 313 sources that I have registered. I've got about 45,000 assets, and then 247 glossary terms. I'll take you step by step into the different aspects of the tool. So let's look at something called sales order details, which basically I have prepared a way of demoing some of, because this is, I just want to make sure that I'm able to demo all the features of it. When you hit something like this, it kind of gives you kind of a search experience. You'll have facets on the left side, broken down by different categories. If you look over here, again, sales orders, it's in a data lake. It's also in, it's an Azure SQL table, and, things of that nature. So anything that has the word, you are able to pick up, you're able to look up that word and you're able to see it. Now, how do you do drill down? Again, classic search thing. You have facets on the left side, and you are able to basically drill down upon it. So if you know your sales order is in a SQL table, I'm just going to basically filter on that type. Or if you know that the person who basically is the owner of the database, for example, and you want to basically look up using his names, that's fine too. So over here, I'm picking up a contact. For example, I'm interested in, I know somebody who's the maintainer of the data. Let's say I click on Alex, and I can do a further drill down. Again, very, very, very search experience, facets on the left side to help you to drill down, access the data. So what do you see when you see basically a data asset, right? And primarily, it basically tells you what are the different things with this data assets. In the overview, you will see the hierarchy. It is basically a part of the Azure SQL database. It's on Azure. It's part of the database called SQL DB, and part of the schema. And within that, you have sales order table. So kind of gives you the quick overview of where this data asset is residing. Now, again, in Purview, you need to have the right role in order to access the data. So there are a couple of roles. If you have a reader role, and again, you can narrow down these roles to specific collections, which I'll talk about, so that you're not allowed to see the whole data estate. So again, there is a fine-grained control access, which you can basically bake it in so that you are not able to just see everything. Ideally, you want to see, have access, because it is not storing any data for you, like at the real data set, but it is basically showing you all the meta information. So ideally, we recommend everybody should be able to discover all the meta information about the data assets. And then basically, so that will help you to monetize and build new capabilities around the data. But again, there are customers, especially in the highly regulated industry like financial services and healthcare, they do want to limit the exposure of the meta information to certain groups. So you can still do role-based access control around those groups. We call it containers. So within the properties, again, has some basic properties, but again, this is the most important thing. Gives you a bird's eye view of what the schema looks like. And again, it has the classifications, and it has the glossary terms, but again, it has all this information. Now, the key thing is that how do we do classifications in Azure Purview? And again, I will go into details, but essentially what we do is we have system classification rules that are baked in, but you can also turn on those classifications or turn off those classifications, but you can also build your own classification rules on it. So for example, things like social security number or phone number, those are like standard data elements you can easily classify because they are provided by Microsoft. And so what happens is when we do a scan of your data asset, we are basically doing a kind of a small sampling of a data and apply those regular expressions on the data. And from that, we deduce whether it is what kind of a classification this data element is. And that's how we basically bubble up all that information and catalog it. So yeah, when we do scanning, we do obviously do a sampling of the data to apply those classification rules. At the same time, and another important thing with scan is it basically also gathers statistics around the data assets. Tomorrow, I think there are more and more requirements that are popping up from our customers who are early adopters of Purview. They want to basically understand, okay, if there's a column, let's say a numerical column, can you give us information about the max value and the mean value and the standard deviation on it, and certain data, the statistics about the data itself, apart from, we basically also make sure that we are also doing other things, but again, they want to have much more deeper insights into the data elements. So today, for example, you don't see those statistics, but customers are asking for it. Apart from the number of rows, the number of files, and things of that nature. So every time we do a scan, we will gather the most recent statistics of it. Imagine if you have a data lake and you have, let's say, 10,000 files on it, and we have done a scan of it, and we have gathered all the statistics. We'll reflect that in the catalog. But the scan that was done and the next scan, anything that happens on with that data asset, let's say files got added, files got deleted, we will not know. So when we do the second time scan, we will gather the differential stats, and then that will get reflected. So again, you are in complete control of how many times you want to do a scan. For example, some critical information, for example, you say, okay, this is a very critical information. I want to have people up-to-date information. You could have 7 to 8 scans per day for that small data asset, if that's critical, that you want to have the latest and the greatest stats on it. But for certain other types of data, you say, I'm okay with 1 day or a week, and you are in complete control over how many times you want to run the scan, how fine grained you want the scan to be run, and things of that nature. So that's up to you. Any questions before I move on?
Yeah, Arief, this is Brandon. I'm wondering, from like a security point of view, does it have like a managed identity that you just give read access to your entire server, or how is it pulling this information?
Good question. Yes, so Purview will have a managed service identity, and basically it will have a reader role to basically have access to your data assets. So if you are, you could do scans at, now and people who are not from Azure, what are the scope of the scans? You could do, so if you look at Azure, you have a resource group, which is nothing but a collection of resources that are bunched together. So if you have a common life cycle, you bunch those resources together. It could be because of project or whatever it is. But then the next layer is obviously subscription, and the next layer is management groups. So you are in complete control over it. At what level you want to basically have the scans. You could do at the resource level. You could do just say, I'm just going to give Purview to this database or this location in the this container on the data lake, for example. Or you could do it at the resource group level. So anything that, if you have 10 data lakes, 10 storage accounts, it will do a scan of all that. If you're doing for subscription, then it will do every data assets that is within that subscription. And if you're doing at the management group level, all the subscription that falls under that management group, it will basically, irrespective of what the data sources are, it will scan and gather those stats. Did I answer your question, Brandon?
Yeah, that answered my question. Thanks.
Okay. So now, if you see over here, for example, this is a copy activity. It is showing a lineage information, and again, it is basically taking data from sales order table and then is copying, and then it is putting into a data lake storage Gen 2 path, and it shows you exactly where it is storing. So kind of gives you a bird's eye view of where the source and who was the responsible compute that was basically created this derived data sets. So imagine if you have Power BI, again, I think I have an example of Power BI that basically, and you have complex, and tomorrow we'll be supporting Databricks, we'll be supporting Informatica. So imagine if you are able to capture all of that is happening in your ecosystem, you exactly know what's happening. So a lot of the people who are, one of my customers in private preview, and they are scanning millions of assets, and they are basically looking at their Power BI reports. And if they don't like something in the report, they use that as a mechanism to say, okay, where exactly this data came from and how it got transformed and where it got transformed. And then they're able to basically use this lineage to follow the trail and find out the source of the problem. So yeah, this is something that is going to get very enriched, very rich in the future. Multiple teams are working with different partners and things like that. Yeah. So this basically within the assets, you
Hey,
can
Arief.
have. Go ahead. Any questions?
Sorry, before you move on, you can go back with a quick question about that, the lineage. So it looks like on the left there, you've got the columns in the table. Are you able to essentially do this at the column level, say,
Yep.
field level? Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yes, you can do it at the column level too. Yes.
And would you be able to, say you have a scenario where you've got a single source, that ends up populating, multiple fields downstream, so it has multiple landing points in different tables. Would you be able to easily set it up to essentially show that source and the various, like if you have a column in the source, show the various columns that are populated downstream?
Yes, as
Okay.
long as you use the engines we are supporting, right? If you're using ADF, or if tomorrow we'll come up with Databricks, we will have hooks over there where we'll know exactly what is happening. So right now we are supporting our tool because we know how our tool works, we know what spits out, and we are able to extract that information, right? So it will be definitely depend on the ETL tool you're using.
Got it. And is this like downloadable into like a grid format if you wanted to look at it that way?
Downloadable, I'm not sure, but one thing is that if you have the right credentials, right, I can look at this data itself into using a Power BI desktop, right? So I can basically click over here and see what data I have in sales order table, provided I have the right access control. So I don't know about that thing about downloading and looking at a grid thing.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, again, this is an evolving tool. We came up with this tool a year and a half back. It's taken a while because the vision is so broad. It has to integrate with a number of products. This is one of the products that is going to sit at the core. Not only the ETL tool, the different data sources, the third-party partners, the security products, right? This will be integrated with Azure Security Center. And anytime any violation happens, those will be flagged over there, So the reason why the release is a little bit slow is because it has to work with a number of products. The other thing, go ahead.
One question on that. So in this demonstration you're showing, right, it's pulling the data only from the Azure, but does it go beyond Azure? For example, if I have data coming from on-premises,
yes,
SQL Server database, is it going to scan that as well and show that here?
That is correct. Yeah. That is correct.
For example, if there are multiple layers, we have vendor, for example, where the data is hosted on DB2. From DB2 to we get the data into SQL Server on premises, and then we load it into Azure Synapse Analytics through Data Lake. So is all of that going to show in this scenario? Or
yes. So we are basically supporting different assets. If you look over here, for example, obviously on-prem SQL Server is supported. And if you look over here, Amazon S3, Postgres, SQL Server, again, AWS S3, we're also working on Redshift. So Teradata is in private preview. But the idea is that this assets could be anywhere. This could be running on AWS. This could be on your on-prem. Teradata could be on-prem, no problem. As long as the access control is given to Purview and the scans are set up, it will go and start scanning it for you. And then And then if you're using, for example, Azure Data Factory, the reason I'm harping on Azure Data Factory is because that's currently supported. And if you're, for example, extracting data from Teradata from on-prem using ADF and landing into a data lake, and then you're curating, using ADF, for example, the data mapping flow, for example, within ADF, or writing your own logic using that, all that transformation will be captured today. And then wherever you land it, let's say into a data lake or a SQL database or Postgres managed service, it will basically capture the entire lineage for you.
Okay.
Does anything need to be installed on any of these types of servers to do this, or is it just a?
No, this is a SaaS product, right? So really, you don't have to do any installation.
Okay.
Yeah, when you set the scans, that's the time where you're basically you will be basically giving the right access to it. So for example, if I register, right, I can basically these are all the data sources that are supporting. Today we are supporting, for example, right, Cassandra, Irwin, Looker, and again, this will explode as time flows by. So obviously in AWS, if you click on AWS, obviously you can do it at various levels. Again, I don't have credentials for any of it. But again, registering here, for example, let me take you an example through that. For example, over here, as I said, you could register sources. They could be at the management group level, at the subscription level, and then you basically select a collection. And again, I'll explain you what the collection concept is. But whatever as data catalog is, whatever information you're gleaning, how do you basically organize it? And that's basically the concepts of the collection, right? So that's the idea. So yeah, currently we are supporting this many. And again, this will definitely blow up in the future. More. I think it will be at par with what Azure Data Factory supports, but it will be a while. So go ahead. Any question? Okay. So the concept of collection is very important. It not only helps you to organize your data. That is the one thing. Like for example, here, I have decided that, I'm going to create a collection around Azure sources. So I'm going to, again, it really depends upon how you want to carve it out based on your company's, you could do it by line of businesses, or it really depends upon your company and your culture, how you look at your data assets, right? So you can group it in any way. But the key thing you have to remember is that around these collections, right, you will be able to give fine-grained access control to people who are curating the data. Curating means who are basically responsible for maintaining all the data. For example, who's the expert on the data, or who's the go-to person, or somebody wants to change something. So those are the curator thing. Then the reader, for example, I don't want people to, for example, look at any data that's in this part of the collection, like financial services. These are all the sensitive data assets. I don't want anybody even to know about that meta information, right? You could group it in this collection and basically make sure that the access is only for this collection. Only people who are really, really responsible for their data, they only have access to that collection, right? So fine-grained access control is built around collections. So very important. This is something that you got to get it right because of how your data is laid out, in how intuitively understand. But from a security perspective, this becomes important because if you don't organize it correctly, then your access control mechanism could run into issues and configurations. Because this was not something that was when the Purview came out in the public as a public preview. At that time, there was no concept of giving fine-grained access control around collection. If you had a reader role, it means you have access to the entire data assets. Then, new requirements came up, and then they started basically breaking it down at the collection level. Now, tomorrow they could again change it and further refine it, again, make it more fine grained. Instead of collection, they could say, I can only give access to specific data assets. But mind you, the whole philosophy of having a catalog information is that people come there, understand what it is, and they discover the information, and so that they can build new capabilities. If you really, really lock it down, then it kind of defeats the purpose. Now, in data catalog Gen 1, when the product came out, we forced companies that you could only have one data catalog for the entire organization. It didn't really go well with the customers. But in Azure, in Purview, you could have as many as you want. Is it a great idea? Personally, I don't believe it, because now you are creating siloed systems. Not everybody having a overview of everything you have. But again, you could have a need. I have customers who are doing, they're doing for dev, test, and GA. They are doing that. Then there are customers who are trying to have one, or I have seen at least 2 Purview in production for one customer. Again, they had to justify it, and there were other reasons why they went through it. But generally speaking, having one data catalog is perfect, because people can come, discover, monetize your data, and build new services around it. Any questions before I move forward? No. So when you do a scan, right, you could basically create certain you could basically create certain rule sets around it. Why? What I mean by that is that, let's say, so I'm creating a scan. I can basically limit it to specific folders of my choice, or I can do a whole scan of a data lake. But again, the idea is that we have customers who want a lot of flexibility, right? So again, when you're doing a scan on a particular assets, you could do it at a table level. For example, in a database thing, you could do it at a database level, you could do it at a server level, right? In a data lake, for example, you could do at individual folders and files level. Now, the other thing is that there could be a lot of files in it. For example, just taking an example of data lake. And the idea is, let's say you have certain files like GIF and image files. You don't want to basically scan it, right? So you can define it into this into your scan rule sets. What are the things you want? For example, over here, I'm able to, the default scan rule set says, hey, anything of this sort or file extension, go ahead and scan it, okay, and gather all the statistics around it. And for classifications, everything is turned on by default. And you could basically build your own custom rules and you can apply. But again, this is something you don't want it, for example, and you could basically create your own, right? And these are all basically custom rule sets people have believed it, have created it. So when you scan it, you could customize it, what exactly you want to scan, not only at the storage account level or database or server level, but also within your data assets, what exactly you want to scan. So you have a very, very complete control of what exactly you want to do with it, right? Again, the idea is that we want to give as much flexibility as possible, because obviously, the more files you have, the more data it is gathering, and obviously based on how much parallelization you will have, the more time it will take to scan those things. So all of those things matter. So customers, if they have not carved out their data lake properly, for example, into those standard zones of bronze, silver, and gold, and you are scanning a lot of unneeded data, and so again, this is something that will allow you to have a very controlled way of scanning exactly what data you want to scan, Now, the other thing within the, especially in a data lake or a blob storage, right? You today, for example, if you're doing big data compute, you are carving out your folder space into partitions, and again, it could be with depending upon the use case, depending upon the data, you could lay out in different way. You could lay out as, if it's a time series data, you could lay it out as a partition by date, or you could lay it out because Databricks needs certain partitioning because it's trying to do all these left joins and you need to have partitioned it properly. So again, the idea is it is the same data assets. So what we have come up with this concept called resource set. Resource set is nothing but, I'm talking about, let's say, a sales order. Now, within the sales order, you have thousands of folders that just captures the data. But again, the data assets is just sales order. So the resource sets is saying all these millions of files, they are basically a part of this resource set of sales order. So when you look for information, in the catalog, they will not show you that millions of files or what it is. It will just show you that these are part of the resource set. In that way, you're not just muddling all that information. It will show you, okay, this resource set sales order has 10,000 files and partition into this folders, but it is not going to basically say, I've got sales orders, 10,000 sales orders files. It will not say that. So that's the concept of resource set. Just think of it as a higher class. And within that class, you have all this detailed information about different files around it. Did it make sense? So for example, over here, 45,515 assets, right? But if you have millions of files for a resource set, for a sales order details, for example, it will come as one asset. That's a resource set of that one asset. Think of that way. Any questions? Okay. So now glossary is very important. This is for obviously if you have business terminology and you want to apply it to your data assets, this is the place where you go. And again, if you look at, for example, a glossary term, like for example, let's say advisory services. So again, this is there are very important things you have to understand about the glossary. It's defined by what we call as a template, and a template is that, for example, if somebody wants to define a glossary term and you say, I'm going to create a template and you have to give the 7 fields, then only the glossary term is populated. So that's the template. So you are trying to make sure that people are just not adding 1 or 2 or 3 fields. You come up with a template so that you're standardizing the definition around certain set of attributes, right? So you have the system defined template. That's why it's called system default. If you look over, for example, advisory services, and then you are mapping what are the different assets that are mapped to this this glossary terms. But the idea is that you can come up with your own template. You can extend a template. You can say, okay, I'm going to use the system default, but because I also want to add cost center, for example, as one of the additional field, then that becomes a part of your custom template by extending the default template. In that way, if anybody is populating using that template, they will have to fill out those extra field too, so that proper information is cataloged. Otherwise, this will become a big ball of mud. Make sense? Okay, so again, gives you information what exactly this advisory services is. What are the different assets it has mapped to, who created it, when it was last updated. So a lot of information itself about that thing. And then you can do a further drill down using. So these are all the places where the glossary term has been applied. So let's say customer with sales. If you look at over here, for example, It shows you. And again, this is a pretty cool lineage information I accidentally came upon, but you could see it, what exactly is happening over here. Again, everything is being used by Data Factory and how all the whole lineage is coming together. So from the left, 2 tables, customer sales order, uses ADF to copy the data into a blob storage. And this is a data lake storage. And then again, you get the drift, what exactly is happening here, right? So the idea over here is that if you look at this schema, it exactly says, okay, advisory services. Okay, it is mapped to a data element called company name. So that's the idea. But it's very important that this is to capture the. So again, think of a data element as basically it is kind of tagged into 3 dimensions. One is the sensitivity label, the other is the glossary term, and the third is the classification, right? So on those 3 different axes, you are basically cataloging the data. Think of that way. Any questions? Again, this is hierarchical view. Again, if you see over here address, there's a hierarchy to it. So anyway, so I just wanted to make sure that people get the templates are important. If you're trying to come up with a new, you have to use one of the templates to define your glossary terms.
So where is it getting the definitions from?
So you could, so for example, if I'm defining the new term, right? These are the different templates that are there. The one that Microsoft provides is called System Default, but you could basically come up with your own template if you want. I can create a new template, define my template, and then define the glossary term. Okay.
So for the system default, so where did it get that definition from? So.
And that is something that Microsoft think this is the best, this is, so for example, this is the system default. Okay. So Microsoft says, these are the fields that we think this is good enough, but then you say, this is not good enough for me, So
I got that. My question was like, where did it get that definition, right? For example, for address, it says a way of locating a customer, right? Using a street name, house number, city, zip code.
No, this is something that
somebody had to create this definition.
Yes, this is something that you will define. These are glossary terms that will be specific to your organization.
So where is that defined? Is it in the Purview or is it somewhere?
Yeah, it's defined in the Purview, yes. And you can also import it. Like, for example, if you already have a definition, of all the glossary terms, you can import it if you want. Okay.
Can you, if you have, let's say that you have a data source and you have extended properties on a SQL table, you probably can't do it through here, but through the API, can you associate the extended properties, which potentially could be definitions, to populate definitions?
Yes, you can definitely use Atlas API to populate any data asset. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I think that will be the go-to thing for us, is that the other thing is the reason it's built on Atlas is that as these functionalities which are not given out of the box, you could still, because all the Atlas APIs are supported. And if you look at what it means, if the APIs have to be supported, then you need to have a data model behind it that basically supports that API, right? It's kind of a web applications with a data model behind it. So if you look at the Atlas data model, it's similar to, it is exactly the same as Purview data model, right? So in that way only we can support the Atlas API. So if you understand the data model of Atlas and API, you can basically call the RESTful API and add any information you want to, essentially. Okay. Okay, so then what we have is basically insights. It tells you, like, this is a cool view of, it tells you how your data is stored on what different services. But again, then it also gives you different breakdowns of it. Again, what I'm saying is this is very high level. They will basically also make sure that tomorrow you will also get insights into what data is actually being accessed more and more. For example, once the sensitive labels are applied and when the security policies are in place, then they will also tell you that what data assets are being applied or used, leveraged, changed more and more, who is accessing, and where the information. So it's think of that data is basically a dynamic organism, right? It's going to constantly change. So you will have a kind of a single glass of paint to see, okay, how my organism is changing shapes as my organization is evolving, So think of that way. So they are working on a lot more insights into how your data is evolving over the period of time. So right now it's a very, very static view. Scans obviously kind of gives you a rough report on where all the scans were run. Glossaries, again, gives you kind of a cloud, which are the glossary terms that are widely used and things of that nature, right? Classification, same case, So again, you don't see much information, but the idea is that what are the classifications that are highly used, and gives you that breakdown where they are stored, who is using it, things like that. So you are able to drill down and things of that nature. So yeah, so the insights is another analytics pane that will get richer and richer over a period of time. That's basically the idea behind it. Now, as you go through this this thing, right? Classification is something that is going to be very critical. You want to know exactly where all your source security numbers are captured, what data assets and things like that, right? So this is basically the place where you can what Microsoft provides by default, but you can also create your own customs. And then basically all you do is basically you come up with this. And then, all we are doing is asking you to give us the regular expression of how you want us to classify the data. And then you also have to say, okay, how much it should match, 60%. If we are sampling, for example, let's say X amount of records, we want to make sure that when we apply those regular expressions, 60% of the data matches those. And that's how we'll say, okay, now we are confident. Some people want a very higher threshold, unless 90% of the data is not classified. I want to be, so again, you have complete control of how much sampling you want to do and how much threshold you want to have. So classification rules, obviously, again, people can come, you can have a process where you can define different classification rules. Again, these are different states. You could define it today, let's say a classification rule tomorrow, for example, let's say a line of business is acquired by some other company and you don't require those classification rules. You can turn off over here, and that's where it will stop applying all the classification rules on top of your data, and it will avoid it. So a lot of the things, for example, which Microsoft provides, you really don't care, Belgium driver license number and things like that. So you can basically turn off a lot of this, and make sure that you have your own classification settings. Because obviously the more classification rules you have, the more the scan will take time because it's applying those things. Resource sets. I think I kind of explained what a resource set is. So if you break it down, like this is how your partitions are, right? I'm breaking down a folder by year, month, day, 6 hours. So these are basically the partition patterns. We will understand it, how you partition it, and that basically will collate as a resource group. Okay, data factory, right? Right now, the tool we support is obviously data factory. An organization can have one to many data factories. So if you can register your data factory within Purview, so as soon as the registration happens, now Purview has a handle to your data factory, and it basically starts collecting all the information from the data factory and basically populating your data catalog. This is going to basically get richer and richer as we start supporting other data tools and things like that. Access control. Again, this is something that is evolving, but the idea is that you think of this, that we have, I think we have about 3 roles. One is the data administrator, Let's see what roles. I thought it's going to take me to the thing. So essentially, there are three roles right now: the data administrators, the data curator, and the data reader. Right now, again, this will change as new features are being added. So again, those will be the roles that will be defined in the Azure Active Directory, and based on that, RBAC will be applied and things of that nature. Now, again, for example, if you come over here, let's say, let me see if I have a Power BI, example. Let's see if I just type in Power BI, see what happens. Okay, let me see if I have, okay, so let me select by there are three Power BI reports, sorry, there are more than 20, there are 23 actually. And again, if you see that there are reports which are captured, there are data set that are captured. So let's look at the report and lineage. And again, if you see over here, the report has data that's basically a Power BI data sets called finance, and it's coming from retails and sales gen, right? Gives you enough information about the Power BI report, where exactly it is, and you can find out who the owners of this are, or the experts and the owners, and how are they related. So again, if you see over here, gives you enough information to bubble up, what exactly, how that whole report is constructed. Okay. So I've got 6 minutes, right? So I just want to make sure that, I hit upon the most important aspects of catalog. So Purview tool that's coming out, and happy to answer any of your questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you talked about this going GA in the next couple weeks or so. So how do we know how Microsoft is going to be pricing this? Is it going to be by cycles or by storage, or what type of pricing format are they expecting?
So the reason I am avoiding the whole topic of pricing is because I think details will come out on the 28th, and I think they will flesh it out. But again, definitely the scanning is, and depending how much parallelization you want, you will have a separate number for that. And then obviously the amount of meta information it is storing. So those are the two pieces that basically will drive your cost.
Now, is the scanning coming out in GA or no?
That is correct. For the data sources that we are currently supporting. So as I showed you, anything that's in preview, we will not guarantee that there won't be any SLAs. But I just showed you this one. So anything that's not a preview, or we will support the SLAs for that. For example, we are supporting SAP, Teradata, and things of that nature. We'll support Google BigQuery. Actually, I'm surprised to see that this still says in preview. We have seen a lot of users adopting it, but I think this will sooner than later. This will become a supported SLA data source.
Okay, so anything that doesn't say preview is coming out with GA.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
And so it can all be scanned. Okay.
Yes.
And okay.
Yeah, and it could be on any. It could be in private cloud, on-prem, or on other data sources. Yeah, no problem.
Is Salesforce on the roadmap anywhere?
Good questions. I don't know that, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I would be surprised, because Salesforce likes to charge you by the kilobit, for every time you
I'm
get
sure.
access to data. So I would be surprised if they would.
Now, they did have it for data catalog, but it didn't give you a whole lot, but it is available for data catalog.
Yeah. So again, it's very hard to say when you're working with a SaaS product. Obviously, Data Factory can pull out information from Salesforce systems,
Sure.
but again, we will have to have some kind of a guidance, especially when you're scanning it.
Right.
How much you expect to incur the Salesforce side of cost, when you're scanning it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that I don't miss out on anything that is important on the slide deck.
Will the slide deck be available to us?
Yes, I will definitely share this with David, and then he can share it with everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. Am I saying something? Am I missing something? Okay. So these are the supported roles right now. Admin, curator, reader, so definitely a security, if people want to have, once the GA comes out, we will definitely share. Like, for example, Microsoft does come out with recommendation and guidance in a prescriptive fashion, how to use the tool. For example, if you look at how do you carve out your Azure world using the cloud adoption framework, for example, landing zones and things of that nature. That is something that we come out like a little bit later, because we have enough learnings from our customer base, and then we basically come up with a recommended approach in a prescriptive way to say this is how we should do it. But again, Purview is a single tool. Again, there will be a time after a couple of years, we will say, hey, maybe you could carve out your collection this way. Maybe you could have your access data. But again, this is going to be very, very organization specific.
And with Purview, what is the future of data catalog?
So cataloging, so
The regular data catalog that's available today in Azure.
I can't answer that
Version
question.
1. Version 1, I guess.
Yeah, I can't answer that question because we will support it for, obviously, what we recommend is to use Purview. But we think that we will support if we have customers that are using it. But again, that tool is very, very limited. But ideal scenario is that we definitely encourage customers to use this tool.
Yeah. You're gonna see a large price difference, though. Definitely.
Okay. So anyway, so that's basically, I think I have hit on most important points using the demo rather than showing the slide deck and boring you, making you all bored. So yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, looks good. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. All right, David, I will hand over the control to you.
Okay, thank you, Arief. This is very good and helpful for a lot of people, I'm sure. So we look forward to the, I guess, more information to be coming out shortly on this, sounds like. But this is a great overview. Thank you for providing it.
Sure.
Any last thoughts? Anybody have any questions or before we wrap up? Okay.
So will they, I guess they'll update the pricing page on the 28th.
I would say yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just hope that this was worth it. Like, I hope I was able to, and if anybody has any questions, not of Purview, just general data services of Microsoft, just so that how does this tool work with some of the things that you're using, please let me know. I hope I can answer those questions.
Thank you
because
so
I know
much.
a gentleman wanted to see how it could be used for data cleansing and all that. No, this tool will not do that for you. And it will not have, it will not store any information also within it, except the meta information. Again, there are requirements from customers where they would like to have a small sliver of sample of data so they could see the actual data. Again, this is debatable whether we'll have it or not.
Like the what is it called? Yeah, profiling. There we go.
Yeah, profiling. Yeah, so profiling is still meta information, but to show you file records from a specific table or files, we don't know whether we want to do that.
Okay.
Cool. Well,
Okay.
thanks so much, Arief,
Thank you.
for your time and for presenting today.
Thank you, Arief.
Well, welcome. Okay.
Thanks again.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Alrighty.
Thanks everyone
Right
for
on time.
joining.
Yep.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.